Luke and Acts were my main indoctrination. Sorry, education biblically as a youngster.
Yeah.
That's actually interesting. Rarely when you say, "What's your favorite gospel?" I rarely hear anyone say Luke.
Usually it's John.
It's usually John. Some people really like the brevity of Mark, but yeah, for Luke and Acts to be your go-tos, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was I love the stories that you find within the narratives of Acts. I mean, that was pretty cool, but that
Marcus
would
to the point.
Mhm.
The billboards on my drive from Kentucky back home to where I'm from in Indiana usually refer me to Matthew. So a lot of those here in the old South.
yeah, I know what you mean.
That's
It's here in
that's
North
weird
Carolina.
because, Matthew is the most Jewish friendly,
I know, right?
and that state isn't, is it?
You know, I'm torn. I'm
So true.
torn between Matthew being so Jewish friendly, guys. I really am. And I've got a scholar coming on soon. She's going to talk about the stoicism in Matthew, but Matthew constantly points to the Gentile mission. And there are some scholars, we talk to Delcy Allison Jr. all the time. I've got his commentaries over there on the shelf. And he said, I didn't want to find the things you're describing, Derek, because I just don't want to see them if they're there. He admits his bias. Like he tells me when he does not want to look for something.
Right.
He's very honest about that. And I said, are there places where God is done with Israel? Like he did everything he could. We had a mission. We went to the Jews. They didn't accept it. Like the few that did, okay, we're done. Now we're moving on to the nations. We're over with Israel, like a divorce. And there are some scholars who think that's what Matthew's up to, especially when Jesus himself hints when the centurion comes up and he says, out of all of Israel, to a Roman centurion, you have better faith than all, like anyone who's in Israel. All these compliments to the Gentiles that show up, there is one negative one where it's like, hey, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans, rather go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But that
Right.
mission ends.
Right.
Then
Well,
it's
it's trying
Great Commission.
Matthew's trying to be the most Jewish of the other one. It's like when you
Right.
see the Jews or the, Jews for Jesus people. That's like how Matthew was. Like, Matthew is, like, trying to be the most Jewish, and the Matthew itself is a priestly name, Matthias,
Mhm.
whereas Mark and Luke are just Roman names, like,
Yeah,
so
but Matthew didn't write Matthew
Yeah,
probably.
and
It's
obviously, that's what
that name wasn't attached at the time of writing, so I
well, that's what I'm saying. It's
yeah.
it's it's trying to be the most
mhm.
Jewish, but it also does have that layer of anti-Semitism big time, I think.
Derek? Uh-oh.
Gross.
It's definitely the Kentucky internet over there.
Mhm.
Moving on, DBR, thank you for the super sticker, my friend. Just making sure I didn't miss a comment.
Look, it's Derek right now.
He'll come right back if it happens. It happens. Doc Pleroma not in the house. Oh, get ready, guys. Visions on the imposter substitution hypothesis might have legs with later mistaken identification with Thomas Didymus or mistaking Jesus for Simon of Cyrene. If you read the him ambiguity in Mark 15:21-24. So this is the idea that Simon helps Jesus carry the cross and then ends up on the cross. And there is later gospels that we find in Nag Hammadi literature where it's like, oh snap. And
Yeah.
Jesus is laughing on the side. Literally, one of the texts has Jesus laughing
Like, literally,
because,
like Life of Brian.
like Life of Brian, I'm not making this up.
And the
There's real literature.
Muslims later, I know the Shia 12ers adopted this as they think that he put someone else up on the cross. Some say it was Judas. They even changed up
Yeah,
a little bit.
I think there's multiple pieces
Yeah,
of
this
literature.
weird.
That's why I love interviewing all these scholars and M. David Litwa. He's like, oh, there's like 4 papyri that say this, and there's 2 papyri that say that. And I'm like, this is awesome. So I'll read that real quick. Mark 15:21-24. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it.
It is random.
Verse 24. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. So he's mentioning might have the identification if you read the him ambiguity. So here you have compelled to pass by Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Then you kind of wonder, and they brought him. Is it talking about Simon of Cyrene here? This is what I think he's trying to say.
That's what
And they
people
brought him, Simon of Cyrene, to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And they offered him, Simon of Cyrene, wine mixed with myrrh. I mean, like, you kind of wonder,
That's
right?
deep. That's some deep, right? That's some deep shit.
Yeah, I would want to study the Greek there because I feel
Sure.
like that's an artifact of, you know, in English we have the pronoun always relates to the last stated subject, but
Right,
that
right.
might not be Greek grammar.
Right.
Yeah, this is above my head. I'm not a Greek
It
guy,
I will
so
say this though, I agree with what you just said, Paulogia, but I will say this though, it is kinda random that
It is.
in the middle of this passage, oh, by the way, some guy named Simon of Cyrene just jumps in the narrative and helps out Jesus carrying a cross, like, why did that have to happen? You know what I mean? Like, that's as far as I'll go with it.
But you did make me now wonder, are there so when I was a Christian, Life of Brian was just like the most heretical thing
Yeah, right.
could exist, right? So I watched part of it as a Christian and never all of it. And so since I've left, I've watched it several times, but are there good documentaries on like what Terry Gilliam and John Cleese and those guys like how much research did they put into? Because it sure sounds like they've put
Well,
some of those conspiracy theories into Life of Brian.
Mhm.
you're right, and because there's another they actually talk about Jesus' father being a Roman soldier, which is found in Celsus and the Talmud. So you know they were going deep into research.
Yeah,
Like,
you
there's no
remember
way
when
they just make that up.
Brian walks in to his mother's house, and then the Roman soldier comes in, you could
Yeah,
tell he was
Yeah,
banging his mom,
yeah.
okay? Well, that whole story right there is this jab that we see possibly a hint at in John. I believe it's in Gospel of John, where it says, "We know it we are not like you born from adultery," or something like that. And it's like, born from adultery? Jesus? Why would someone say that? Now, one could argue that this is before the idea and the hypothesis of Panthera, but the idea that, son of the panther, the idea that the Roman centurion slept with Mary. But it is for sure a story that ends up happening in the Tosefta and later on in Celsus, like one of the
Mm, right.
which
And of course in Mark they always call Jesus the humans call Jesus the son of Mary, never the son of Joseph.
yeah,
red flag. Yeah. But
So
they did do the research, I think.
right.
wow. So yeah, is there a documentary with these guys now? And I need to find this after
Yeah,
we're done. But yeah.
that's a good question because they definitely did some digging, that's for sure.
I don't know, but I love that. I went when I went in person and got that question of yours to Delcy
Yeah,
Allison
yeah.
Jr., I used multiple clips in the intro from
You did.
Life of Brian. I always enjoy that movie. All right, couple more here. My favorite Canadian, just under Neil and Shannon, Big Cow.
So
But
third.
how do we
All
know?
right.